to my channel once again. So in this video I'm going to be talking about how Russia's sway is on decline in the world. The Collective Security Treaty Organization is a military alliance of 6 former Soviet states. They are Armenia, Belarus, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. So the 6. And they're only here to help defensively. If one was attacked, the other CSTO countries will come to their aid. For instance, in January, when there were large-scale peaceful protests and the Kazakh security forces shot dead over 200 unarmed people in Kazakhstan, the Kazakh regime claimed that they were attacked by 20,000 foreign terrorists in Almaty who vanished as suddenly and as inexplicably as they appeared, without any guns or bombs or anything like that being recovered. So it was just a lie, an excuse to kill hundreds of unarmed demonstrators. But anyway, the CSTO Article 4 was invoked, the article of the charter, and so the other 5 CSTO countries dispatched troops, and they helped guard various installations, freeing the Kazakh security forces to go and kill their own people. So that's how it works. So these are the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. Azerbaijan is not a member of the CSTO, and Armenia is very dispirited because sometimes Armenia proper has been attacked. There's Nagorno-Karabakh, which is internationally recognized as Azerbaijani sovereign soil, and Armenia was occupying that for almost 30 years. Even that has always had an ethnically Armenian majority. But anyway, legally Azerbaijani, and there was some fighting there. The Russians wouldn't help in Nagorno-Karabakh because it's legally Azerbaijani. But when Azerbaijan attacked proper Armenia, the land that even Azerbaijan recognizes as Armenia, Russia this year refused to send troops, despite Armenia invoking Article 4 of the CSTO Charter. So they're dispirited by that, but Armenia's got nowhere else to go. A small country of under 3 million people, landlocked, mountainous, without precious resources, not wealthy at all. What are they going to do? The only reason they're even to be in the fight is because they're able to buy cheap Russian weapons. They're very economically dependent on Russia likewise. There's been this border dispute between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, been rumbling on since their independence in 1991. These enclaves and exclaves, this tortuously drawn border to try and enmesh them so the two are interwoven, and because Stalin deliberately messed up the border, so to try and make up the breakup of the Soviet Union impossible. It obviously was possible, it's just been extremely bloody even to this day, and Russia refuses to take sides on that because they're both CSTO members. So there was a CSTO conference in Almaty, Kazakhstan, a few days ago, and it obviously didn't go terribly well for Russia. Only Belarus has advocated for Russia's position on the invasion of Ukraine, and even Belarus hasn't actually sent troops to fight in Ukraine, though I think they're going to. And obviously Belarusian bases have been used by Russia to launch their illegal and unprovoked invasion. And the others have remained stony silent. They have not recognized the areas that Russia has annexed, partly because they realize they'd be next on the hit list. Some Russian politicians have openly said that Kazakhstan has no right to exist, that at a minimum, Russia should take back some northern districts of Kazakhstan, bordering Siberia with an ethnic Russian majority, and so on. So it's all very worrying for them. So Russia doesn't respect them very much. And President Emomali Rahmon of Tajikistan, he publicly said to Putin, "We want more respect from you in Russia. You know, there are 6,000, 100,000 Tajiks working there. You obviously need this with your falling population." And Russia said, "Well, there are 2 million people, and they should be grateful for these jobs." He's pointing, well, obviously 2 million enter a year. That sometimes children are not working, or there's sometimes people flying to Russia to then change planes and transit on to places in the Middle East or China where they're actually working. So Russia's got less sway. And now Russia could really hurt these countries, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, by not allowing their guest workers in. These are rather underdeveloped countries. The two poorest countries in the erstwhile USSR are Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. They're bereft of precious minerals, and so they really are reliant on remittances from their people who are laborers in Russia sending back money. Now, they're not all laborers, some are doing bourgeois jobs, but not many. But increasingly, people from Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan are going to China or the Middle East to work there. So the Indestructible Brotherhood war games are supposed to take place in Kyrgyzstan this month, 10th to the 14th of August. and Kyrgyzstan suddenly said they're not going ahead. Seems like a snub to Russia, partly their myth that Russia hasn't taken their side at all in this conflict between them and Tajikistan. Tajikistan's got a larger population, so if Russia had to choose, they choose Tajikistan. Moreover, it borders Afghanistan, more strategically important, as well as indeed China. Tajikistan's even given some of its land to China, but it hasn't stopped the Chinese claiming even more. And Tajikistan plays host to a Chinese military base. China is the vital country for these Central Asian lands. It's the biggest investor in Kazakhstan, been the biggest trade partner for about 10 years now. And Russia's sway is waning, which is not to say it's going to disappear anytime soon, probably will ever disappear. And they're de-Russifying themselves linguistically. So there was 70th birthday celebrations for Putin on the 7th of October, and the president of Kyrgyzstan, Sadir Japarov, didn't show up. And some people thought that that was a calculated snub to him. Anyway, so some Russian politicians have said that they're not being sufficiently deferential to Moscow, that anyway, this is a game. They don't want to be sanctioned. They want to suffer secondary sanctions by purchasing things that the Russians can't get and then selling them on, because you can only do that so much before the West notices and sanctions you too. And these countries have got very brittle economies, especially coming out of coronavirus, when a lot of people there couldn't go abroad to work. I mean, people there are close to malnutrition. So it's looking very bad for Russia. And there's a Commonwealth of Independent States, even Turkmenistan is a member of that, but that's really a dead letter. The Eurasian Economic Union, founded in 2011, that really hasn't taken off as the quantum Soviet Union's answer to the European Union. There is not very deep economic integration. Everything goes at a snail's pace. The bureaucracy is so sclerotic. So Putin's attempts to rebuild the Soviet Union through the CSTO, through the CIS, and through the Eurasian Economic Union have all been a bit of a damp squib. So obviously Russia had some sway in other countries, Latin American countries, but Nicaragua was only their way to one to voted their way in the United Nations. Even Cuba didn't vote their way. Venezuela sometimes voted their way. Some countries have abstained, like Brazil. African countries, some of them say, oh, well, we remember the Soviet Union, you helped us against the Western colonialists. Well, that's true, but that means Ukraine as well as Russia. Obviously, Russia is invading another country. That's just the kind of thing that African countries complained about Western European countries doing to them in the 19th century. Some people have even said in Kyrgyzstan that Russia is actually behind the clashes between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan to keep them bidding for support, though I don't buy that one myself. Russia's one of its main exports, besides hydrocarbons, is weapons, because they're the cheapest on the market. They're clearly not very good, and that's been underscored by their poor performance in this war against Ukraine. And Russia doesn't really have many arms for export because they have to use them all themselves, because they desperately need them. So short of things because of this war in Ukraine. So it really has diminished Russian sway, and obviously increased that of China. China is much more important than Russia in Central Asia, and this trend has been accelerated by this war in Ukraine. Russia has to devote all its attention, all its resources to the war in Ukraine. What can offer other countries in terms of arms exports or money or anything, or diplomatic clout? It's got to do anything to try and say, will you please vote our way in the United Nations, or at very least abstain? So it's obviously not looking good for Russia. And then Putin wanted to boost the Russian population, but hundreds of thousands of young men have left the country since February 2022 because of the war, fearing being drafted. Sometimes their wives, their children have gone too. It's estimated by one demographer that Russia's number of births will fall by 1.2 million next year. So it's really alarming. He wanted to increase the population. It's done the opposite. It's fallen. Now, the people he's subjugated in Ukraine, he will claim as part of his population. But anyway, the Kazakhs used to have a very cordial relationship in the world. And Kazakhstan's outnumbered by Russia 10-1. They can't defend that border. Well, actually more like 9-1. But they're worried about that. So the Kazakhs, they held war games on their northern frontier, partly to see, well, how would we defend if Russia tried to attack them? Kazakhstan was a much better target for Russia. It wouldn't be supplied by the West. How would they get the supplies in? Not through other Central Asian countries, not through China. It's so large. It's minerally rich and all the rest of it. And it couldn't defend itself. But Putin is driven by these ideological imperatives. So the bilateral meetings did not go very well for Putin when he met various CSTO heads. So some people even think the CSTO is in a crisis. Some people are openly questioning the should even exist. But Armenia is going to stay into it because they'd be absolutely screwed without it. No one else is talking about leaving it right now, but Putin had hoped that other countries like Uzbekistan were going to join, but clearly that's not the case. These countries do not want to be seen as too close to Russia, lest they suffer sanctions as well. And so many young Russians have fled to these former Soviet countries that Putin might pressurize them, you've got to return these guys to us, which I think they would eventually do if push came to shove. The Armenians who couldn't afford to offend Russia too much, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, which way would they go? Kazakhstan's more difficult to tell whether they would or not. All right, thank you so much for watching my channel. So please subscribe to on Patreon and see more content, and donate on PayPal, George Callahan, 79 @gmail.com. Bye.